Blending genres in video games is nothing new, especially in this modern age of complex gaming. It seems that most every title, in particular those from indie studios, has some sort of roguelike element to it, or inspiration from the survival genre, or exploration quite similar to that found in the Legend of Zelda series, or even a little bit of all of the above. Few developers, though, are able to blend these influences together so seamlessly as Massive Monster has with Cult of the Lamb. Cult of the Lamb is equal parts roguelike, colony sim, action-adventure dungeon crawler, and resource management simulator. It's a game that is ever-evolving, starting small and simple but quickly becoming much more complex, building off of what came before, just like that of an uncontrolled fire blazing in a forest. The player assumes the role of a small anthropomorphic lamb, the last of his kind, and as such is to be sacrificed to appease the four powerful bishops of the old faith. Just as life takes you, the lamb awakens in a realm that is just as chilling as it is heavenly. The lamb is confronted by a towering, three-eyed cat-like being that is wrapped in chains and wears a veil covering its menacing face. The creature explains that he is the one who waits, an ancient god that once ruled this world but was overthrown and banished to this realm by the four sibling bishops. The one who waits has used all of its power to bring you back to the land of the living, and in exchange demands that you build a cult in its honor, and take back all he lost from the four bishops that had you slain. Right off the bat, we have to discuss the, as the developers so aptly put it, cute but creepy art style. The game's world is inhabited by cheerful, cartoony woodland creatures, much like our protagonist, the lamb. These animals have big doe eyes, exaggerated smiles, and funny animations. Many of the surroundings, too, adopt this charming aesthetic, with mushrooms that happily bop to the music and bright, warm colors that seek to welcome you in. At first glance, you cannot help but think of early Disney animations or other similar classic cartoons. You don't have to look hard, though, to see the darkness dwelling within. Creeping into this cute world is a sinister gloom, overtaking it like weeds in a garden. Next to those bopping mushrooms may be the gruesome bones of the dead, red glowing pentagrams and other devilish imagery laid burned into the earth. You'll encounter enemies with deep, twisted expressions, and the once adorable animal folk may even, on occasion, leak thick streams of blood from their widened pupils. All of this makes for a game that fits right into the Devolver Digital catalog of published titles. Hotline Miami, Death's Door, Carry On, My Friend Pedro, and so many others present some of the most bizarre, creepy, and above all, thrilling experiences, not just in indie gaming, but in the industry as a whole. Cult of the Lamb confidently sits right alongside them. Upon being resurrected, one of the first things you are provided is a large plot of land in which to develop the camp for your cult. Your overall goal here is to extract faith from your disillusioned followers, and in turn use that faithful essence to grow strong enough to overcome the might of the powerful bishops. To do this, you must construct buildings, farm crops, cook food, harvest resources, add decorations, and plenty more to satisfy the needs of your growing flock of cultists. Satisfying them enough will lead to them gaining a level, increasing their usefulness, as well as the amount of faith that they provide, so keeping them as happy as an indoctrinated clam should be your number one priority. Much of the difficulty comes from managing the resources within your camp. Most everything constructed within your settlement needs materials and/or a person operating it in order to run. For example, your plot of tilled earth does little good if you don't have seeds to plant and a farmer to tend to it. Shelters provide comfort to your flock, but they will need to be frequently repaired with pieces of chopped wood, or else they'll become unusable. You'll constantly be gathering new resources to maintain your burgeoning camp, while also seeking to grow your number even further. I do wish that it was a tad easier to assign your followers to the numerous chores that you need doing. You have a menu where you can see all of your cultists at a glance, but not the jobs that they are currently undertaking. Instead, you have to manually go up to each one and tell them what to do. And there's so much going on, this can be quite overwhelming, and a simple option in the menus could fix a bit of the hassle. Your devoted followers can also be a picky bunch. Some may be lazy in nature and thus best put to praying at altars rather than performing manual labor. Others may thrive in a filthy environment where most will be sickened by it, so you must find ways of appealing to both sides without driving followers away. It's this frequent balancing act of trying to keep your entire flock happy that really keeps you on your toes when managing your camp. Problems arise when your faith plummets due to not meeting their needs. Some followers may up and leave, while others will become dissenters and will ignore commands in order to curse your name and spread falsehoods throughout your camp, recruiting more to their ignoble cause. To cull this aggression, the game presents you with a few different options. Perhaps you calmly speak to them each day, very slowly steering them back to your way of thinking. You may choose to instead place them in prison, isolating them from the flock so you can brainwash them to your side. More extreme decisions come in the form of sacrificing them to make a gruesome example to the rest of the cult, and murdering them in cold blood is always an option too, just make sure no one else sees you do the deed. Once per day, you can perform a sermon from within your camp's temple to collect faith from all of your satisfied followers. Collecting enough will allow you to choose from a tree of combat-related abilities to aid you in your adventures. You may increase your health, for instance, or unlock vampiric weapons that siphon health from defeated foes, or even multiply the amount of damage certain attacks do. The ability tree here isn't too complex, with only a handful of powers on each tier. Some may dislike the lack of customization, but this method at least succeeds in making the player feel as if they become a chosen warrior for an all-powerful god. Devotion is earned through the shrines that your cultists pray to, as well as aiding them in quests and helping them in other ways. You may even steal devotion from shrines erected to the bishops that you encounter when exploring. Devotion is used to enhance the construction of your camp, awarding you with new buildings, decorative items, and resources. Though the things acquired via devotion won't really help you on your crusade to defeat the bishops, they will make managing your camp much easier and in turn give you more faith in the long run. Lastly, tenets can be established that give permanent traits to your cult as a whole. To create a tenet, you must acquire 3 slabs of a commandment stone, which are earned through quests, leveling up your cultists, or found exploring. Then, you may use the commandment stone to improve one of 5 beliefs within your cult: law and order, possessions, sustenance, afterlife, and work and worship. With each improvement, you will be given a choice between one of 2 beliefs to adopt. For example, you may choose to make all cult members generate devotion 15% faster, or to increase their work production by the same amount. Another choice you may encounter is to unlock a fasting ritual, which will allow followers to not eat or be hungry for 3 full days, or a feasting ritual, where all followers become fully fed and you immediately gain 25 faith. These kinds of choices do give some extraordinary customization options that are missing in the combat areas. Speaking of, rituals are an important asset to solving problems within the cult and to quickly earn precious faith. Rituals involve everything from the feasting and fasting rituals explained above, as well as bonfire dances, sacrifices to the one who waits, wedding ceremonies, and so on. To perform a ritual, you will need to use the bones gained from slaying your enemies, so eventually you'll need to take up your blade and launch your crusade into the lands of the old faith. Adventuring is very similar to other roguelike games such as Hades or The Binding of Isaac. When you first enter the dungeon, you'll be given a random melee weapon and a magic ability, which this game terms as a curse. You must then travel through a series of randomly generated zones with the end goal of reaching and defeating the boss at the end. Dungeon zones are quite varied, giving you equal opportunity for combat and to scavenge supplies. You may come across a clearing that awards you with a stash of lumber, for instance, or maybe a store to buy new equipment, or even a new follower you must rescue if you want to add him to your number. Most areas, though, are complex combat zones, which are made up of multiple connected rooms, the majority of which are filled with enemies to slay, although there may be bonuses like those described previously just waiting to be uncovered. There's also the chance that you may stumble upon one of the dreaded bishops in your travels, who will seek to punish you by summoning swarms of enemies to your location, or maybe even cursing your flock with a plague, such as famine or sickness. After completing a zone, you are given a choice on which one to enter next. Most of these zones have an icon that gives you a hint of what you may encounter within, though some are a complete mystery. This allows you to practice some form of strategy for each of your dungeon runs. Maybe you want to maximize gaining materials, thus you'll want to avoid combat as much as possible. Perhaps you want to quickly deal with the area's boss so you can get back to camp before your followers grow disgruntled, so you choose the shortest route. There's a lot more to consider here than in most other roguelike games, so it's great to have some form of control in a genre that's built to be so random. Dungeon runs are also usually pretty brief compared to others in the genre, where some games may expect players to run through multiple areas for upwards an hour or more at a time. Cult of the Lamb averages at about 10 minutes per dungeon, so you're not all that indisposed from your cult of followers for too long at a given time. Dungeons aren't the only places you may explore while away from your camp either. In your travels you may come across inhabitants that unlock other regions. These areas don't have enemies to kill, but do have quests to accept, stores to barter with, and collectibles to obtain. They even have enticing minigames that can provide nice rewards, such as a dice game called Knucklebones, and a fishing game that is ripped straight from Stardew Valley, though nowhere near as difficult. Combat is rather simple, but exciting enough that it feels much more than it actually is. You have a button to perform your melee attack, another button to cast your single curse spell, and a button to roll dodge out of harm's way. That's really all there is to it. Enemy variety keeps the combat from growing stale. You have foes that will continuously chase you around the arena, stationary fiends that launch area of attack projectiles at you, large brutes that will knock a chunk out of your health, speedy baddies that you'll have to swiftly avoid, and plenty more. Arenas are often tight, enclosed areas that are packed with enemies, so while it may be a little overwhelming dealing with everything being thrown at you, the dungeon's short length keeps things from getting too out of hand. The random nature of acquiring weapons and curses also keeps things fresh. Because you never quite know what you'll be armed with at any given time, you'll need to become familiar with everything if you wish to survive. Weapons include heavy axes that are slow to swing, to gauntlets that allow huge combos to be built, standard swords with decent reach, as well as short daggers that cut swift and deep at close range. Curses provide a bit more of a unique experience to these standardized armaments. You can leave a pool of poisonous goo that will sap away the energy of anyone trapped within, fire off a group of homing fireballs, blast a foe with powerful spear energy, set up a force field that returns projectiles back to their senders, and many more. These can be devastating to an enemy's health, but you have very limited uses, so players will need to find the perfect opportunity to capitalize on their power. Tarot cards can also be collected and are extremely useful in that they provide passive boosts that remain with you until you return to camp. You may be able to double your melee attack damage, for example, or permanently gain an extra piece of health. The longer you are in a dungeon, the more likely you are to come across tarot cards, which leads to more bonuses and a far easier time against the game's brutal boss fights at the dungeon's end. As previously stated, there are 4 regions that are under control by each of the 4 bishops. To reach each major boss, the player must complete a region at least 4 times, defeating the bishop's lieutenants at the end of each run before finally unlocking a battle against the big bad. This allows plenty of opportunity to get accustomed to each region's unique enemies and hazards, as well as collect as many treasures as possible before ultimately moving on to the next. As an added bonus, after defeating a bishop, that region's enemies will grow stronger, presenting a greater challenge but leading to greater rewards and a more lengthy excursion to boot. The roguelike genre is notorious for its difficulty, and fortunately, Cult of the Lamb remains challenging while being accessible to most everyone. There are 4 difficulty settings that you may choose from, to the so simple caveman can do it easy setting, to a hard mode made especially for you masochists out there. Death shouldn't be something that's overly feared either, as you'll lose only a portion of the things you've collected rather than everything that you've obtained, so it's really only a minor setback rather than the crushing blow seen in other roguelikes. A good soundtrack can really elevate a good game to great status, and believe me when I say Cult of the Lamb's music goes hard. Composer Narayana Johnson, aka Riverboy, provides a hypnotic electronic score that will leave you brainwashed like a zombified cultist. The trap beats on top of haunting environmental sounds really immerses you into this unique world of cute critters and deadly demons. On paper, it doesn't seem like it should be a good mix, but in execution, well, I can guarantee this game's soundtrack will be on a lot of best of lists at the end of the year. Sound effects are also superbly well done. Monsters speak in an appropriately devilish language of grunts and chants, while your cultists oohs and ahs are, like the game's graphics, both adorable and spine-tingling. Cult of the Lamb juggles many parts with surprising precision. It's difficult to piece it all together in a coherent review, there's just so much going on, but the game's pacing and presentation keeps it simple and well understood. The graphics, soundtrack, and bizarre uniqueness makes this game something special that will be talked about for a long time. It does come up short in just a few areas though, namely with the lack of customization and building your cult leader, not having a better menu system to keep track of all that's going on within your camp, and a combat system that could use just a tad more depth. With the promise of at least 2 substantial free updates on the way and a playtime of around 15 to 20 hours with plenty of replay value, Cult of the Lamb has enough reasons for gamers to drink the Kool-Aid and embrace this title for all of its dark, deadly charms. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to my channel. Also, check out my social media accounts listed on the left to keep up to date with what new content is coming your way. Lastly, if you like my content and are in a position to do so, please consider donating to my Patreon. Every little bit aids me in creating more videos like this one, and I'm beyond appreciative for all the support. As always, thank you again, and take care, everyone.